On a cold night in Beirut in the 1960s, in one of the luxurious mansions of the Wadi Abu Jamil neighborhood, the sound of laughter and music drifted through the air. Shula Cohen, the Queen of Beirut's high society, a woman with piercing blue eyes and a mesmerizing charm, was hosting yet another of her glamorous parties. Politicians, high-ranking army officers, and the city's wealthiest elites were captivated by her, flocking to her exclusive gatherings. Around midnight, the doorbell rang. Shula, wearing her signature smile, opened the door, expecting to see the face of her lover, Saman. But this time, in Saman's eyes there was no love, only a deadly, cold rage. And in his hands, instead of a bouquet of flowers, was a pistol, aimed directly at the heart of the Queen of Beirut's nightlife. In a single terrifying moment, Shula Cohen's beautiful world collapsed. How did this woman, once known as the Pearl of Mossad, fall into the trap of a fabricated romance? And how was she hunted down by the very people she had spent years deceiving? This is the unbelievable story of a woman who played an entire country with her beauty, but ultimately became a victim of the greatest human weakness: her own desires. History is in the headlines, but the truth? That's hidden in the profiles. Welcome to Profile. Subscribe to join our community of curious minds. The story begins far from the Middle East. Shula Cohen was born in 1917 in Argentina. Her father was a merchant who had migrated from Syria, building a life for his family in South America. But in 1924, he closed his business, uprooted his family, and relocated to Jerusalem in Palestine. It was in this environment that Shula grew up. She was remarkably beautiful, highly intelligent, and possessed a natural, effortless talent for connecting with people. But life took a harsh turn. In the mid-1930s, a severe financial crisis shattered her family's stability. As a result, at the tender age of 16, Shula was married off to Joseph Kishk, a wealthy Lebanese Jewish merchant. This marriage pulled her away from Jerusalem and dropped her directly into the beating heart of the Middle East, Beirut. She settled in the Jewish quarter of Wadi Abu Jamil and over the years became a mother to 7 children. On the surface, it was a quiet, comfortable life. But beneath the skin of this wealthy housewife, a fire was burning. Shula was not satisfied playing the role of a traditional mother and spouse. During those years, the Zionist movement was advancing with full force, and the dream of establishing a Jewish state in Palestine consumed the minds of many Jewish people worldwide. Shula wanted to be a part of this history in the making. Her husband's shop provided the perfect golden opportunity. Merchants from all over the region would pass through, casually talking about their observations, completely unaware of who was listening. With her sharp ears, Shula picked up whispers about Palestinian revolutionaries being trained along the southern borders of Lebanon. Every rumor, every piece of intelligence was like a spark igniting the fire inside her. She had to do something. She had to find a way to help. Finally, Shula made her decision. In a bold and fateful move, she wrote a short letter, handed it to a traveling peddler, and instructed him to deliver it to the Misgav Am settlement in northern Palestine. The text was simple and direct. I am Shula Cohen. I live in Beirut. I want to help you. This single piece of paper was Shula's very first step into the ruthless, unforgiving world of espionage, a world from which there would be no return. The letter Shula sent didn't fall on deaf ears. At that time, the Mossad as we know it today didn't exist. The intelligence and executive arm of the Zionist movement was an organization called the Jewish Agency. They were responsible for Jews worldwide, and they managed a vast underground network of spies and agents across the Middle East, even before the State of Israel was founded. By gathering precise data on every Arab village and town, they were laying the foundations for a future state. For the Jewish agency, suffering from a severe lack of assets in Arab countries, Shula's offer was like a gift from the heavens. Weeks passed. Weeks filled with agonizing anticipation for Shula. Then, one day, while she was busy in her kitchen, a stranger knocked on her door. He claimed to be carrying a message from her family, but in reality, he was the agency's answer. Her first mission? Find a safe house for a Jewish fugitive in Lebanon named Winkler. Shula completed the task with clinical precision. This success swung wide the doors to the world of espionage. Beirut, and specifically the Wadi Abu Jamil neighborhood, became a vital hub for smuggling Jews into Palestine, and Shula Cohen was the key. Soon after, a man from southern Lebanon named Musa Abdullah approached her with an electrifying message. "Zionist security agents want to meet you." For the first time in years, Shula secretly crossed the border from Lebanon into Palestine. In her memoirs, she writes, "I felt as though I was stepping from one world into another, into the world of spying." Across the border, she met with Resnick, an official from the Haganah. The Haganah, founded in 1920, was the primary Zionist paramilitary force. While it started as a defense group for Jewish settlements, as the British mandate neared its end, its nature changed. It became a force used to spread terror among Palestinians, forcing them to flee their homes to make way for the State of Israel. Events like the Deir Yassin massacre, carried out by the Haganah and its allies, were stark examples of this strategy. They created a wave of panic that led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands. Shula's new mission from the Haganah was clear: gather precise intelligence on Palestinian revolutionaries at the border, their numbers, their weapons, and their training sites. After the Nakba of 1948 and the formal establishment of Israel, Shula Cohen's value skyrocketed. Israeli intelligence leaders could now proudly tell Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, "We have a spy in the very heart of Lebanon." Shula moved fast. She established a high society social salon, an artistic and musical hub that quickly became the place to be for Beirut's elite. Lebanese and Arab politicians, high-ranking military officers, and government officials with access to sensitive data all walked through her doors. With her breathtaking charm, and with the help of other beautiful women she had recruited, Shula didn't just steal the hearts of her guests, she stole their secrets. To tighten her grip, she even opened several brothels in Beirut, turning them into honey traps for men of power. The communication with Israel became more sophisticated. Initially, messages were sent via coded radio signals. The airing of a specific song by legendary singers like Kulthum or Abdel Halim Hafez on Israeli radio could mean "message received." Later, a chance meeting with a French Jew named George Molcho provided her with advanced technical equipment, invisible ink, and high-tech communication devices. The Pearl network was growing every day. Figures like Leila Mizrahi and George Anton joined her, but her most critical asset was Mahmoud Awad, an employee at the Ministry of Finance. Awad used his position to get close to politicians, extracting sensitive information and handing it to Shula. He also managed the network's finances, paying salaries and smuggling money from Arab countries into Israel. By the 1950s, Shula Cohen was at the peak of her power. She was the pearl of Mossad in Beirut. But in the world of shadows, every sunrise is followed by a sunset. And for Shula, the shadows were starting to move. In 1958, the tide began to turn. With the election of General Fuad Chehab as Lebanon's president, the rules of the game changed. Chehab understood the Israeli threat better than anyone. He didn't just want a military, he wanted an intelligence machine. He ordered the creation of an elite unit within the Lebanese army, Al-Maktab Al-Thani, the Second Bureau. The Bureau brought together the sharpest minds in Lebanese intelligence, men like Gabi Lahoud and Sami Al-Khatib. Their primary mission? To hunt down Israeli influence on Lebanese soil. The thread that would eventually unravel Shula's empire started in the most unlikely of places, the Ministry of Finance. The minister, Rashid Karami, was alarmed by the massive disappearance of government revenue stamps. He turned to the Second Bureau for help. All eyes fell on one prime suspect, Mahmoud Awad, Shula Cohen's right hand. The Bureau put Awad under a microscope. His phones were tapped. Among hundreds of mundane conversations, one specific call caught the analyst's attention. It was a conversation between Awad and a woman. Her identity was unknown, but her tone and the nature of the call signaled something dangerous. General Sami Al-Khatib later recalled, "After a few weeks, it became clear to us. Shula Cohen was no ordinary socialite. This was our first time facing the reality of an Israeli presence on our soil, so deep and so direct." The Second Bureau now had a target, Shula Cohen. But how do you infiltrate the life of a woman protected by walls of wealth, power, and high-level connections? They looked for her greatest weakness, and they found it. Despite her 7 children and her high society status, Shula was trapped in a cold, stagnant marriage to a husband much older than herself. She was starving for excitement, for passion, for a sense of danger. The Second Bureau decided to satisfy that hunger with a sweet poison. Soon after, a young, mesmerizingly attractive man entered Shula's life. His name was Siman, a private tutor hired to teach her children. He was in his late 20s, with striking blue eyes and a charm that could disarm anyone. But Siman was a ghost. He was actually Milad Al-Qareh, one of the Bureau's most brilliant undercover officers, working under the direct command of Colonel Gabi Lahoud. His mission? Infiltrate Shula Cohen's heart. Milad played his role like an artist. He ignored the children's lessons and focused all his energy on their mother. With poetic words, admiring gazes, and the promise of a life filled with thrill, he slowly dismantled Shula's defenses. Shula, who had never been faithful to her husband and had been involved with many men, fell completely into the trap of this burning romance. She gave him her heart, and then she gave him her trust. It was a masterpiece of intelligence deception. Thinking she had found a loyal lover, Shula shared the darkest secrets of her network with him. She even tried to recruit him for the Mossad, proudly arranging meetings for him with Israeli intelligence officers in Rome and Tel Aviv. During one of these trips, when Shula's passport was stamped in Tel Aviv, making her return to Lebanon nearly impossible, it was Siman who made a single phone call and miraculously secured a forged passport for his beloved, deepening her trust even further. Shula Cohen had no idea that every secret she whispered to Siman went straight to Colonel Lahoud's desk. She had no idea that the Second Bureau had rented the apartment directly above hers, and another in the building across the street. Using the most advanced surveillance technology of the time, they recorded every conversation, every meeting, and every intimate whisper. The entire Pearl network was now in the palm of Lebanese intelligence. The Queen of Beirut was living in a glass cage. After months of gathering evidence, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The Second Bureau knew everything. It was time to bring down the woman the world knew only as a beautiful aristocrat. The arrest was as dramatic as the infiltration itself. Milad Al-Qareh, the man Shula knew as Simon, played his final lethal role. He coordinated with Shula to host a grand party at her mansion. Shula, as always, invited the city's most prominent figures, completely unaware that the house was surrounded. That night, Simon was the first to arrive. But it wasn't a night for love. It was a night for justice. When Shula opened the door for her lover, she wasn't met with an embrace. She was met with the cold barrel of a pistol. In that heartbeat, the truth struck her like a lightning bolt. Her lover was her hunter. Her Simon was her enemy. Shula collapsed. But even in that moment of total defeat, the Iron Lady did not shatter. She quickly regained her composure to face the officers. General Khatib later remarked, "She was no ordinary woman. If she had the chance, she would have killed us all." The news of her arrest exploded like a bomb in both Beirut and Tel Aviv. In Lebanon, the public was in shock. How had this woman operated in the heart of their capital for so long? In Israel, it was a humiliating defeat. Their pearl, their master spy, had been brought down by her own desire for a young man in his 20s. During the interrogations, Shula didn't hold back. Having lost everything, she confessed to it all, exposing every member of her network. However, the Lebanese government moved quickly to bury the most explosive parts of her confession. Shula had named high-ranking Lebanese and Arab politicians she had entrapped. To prevent a massive political crisis that could have torn the country apart, those files were sealed. Her husband was also arrested, accused of knowing about her activities, though he was later acquitted. In 1962, a military court sentenced Shula Cohen to death, but the world was watching. Intense international pressure, especially from France, which held close ties to both Lebanon and Israel, forced the government to commute her sentence to 20 years of hard labor. Shula would only serve 6. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, the landscape of the Middle East changed. Israel, holding a vast number of Arab prisoners of war, demanded one specific condition for an exchange: the release of Shula Cohen. On a scorching summer day in 1967, Shula was driven to the border town of Naqoura. She was handed over to the International Red Cross, and finally, to the Israeli side. It is said that in her final moments on Lebanese soil, she spoke to General Hemdan, the officer transferring her. Regarding Colonel Gabi Lahoud, the mastermind behind her arrest, she simply said, "He was smart, because he managed to trap me." In Israel, Shula Cohen was welcomed as a national hero. Her story, often told with a mix of legend and carefully curated facts, became one of the foundation myths of the Mossad, the warrior pearl who fought in the heart of enemy territory. Shula Cohen spent the rest of her long life in Jerusalem, living in an Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. She passed away in 2017 at the age of 100. This is the story of Shula Cohen, Israel's most famous female spy. A woman who trapped many, but was ultimately undone by a fake romance that mirrored her own tactics. What do you think about Shula Cohen? Was she a brilliant strategist or a victim of her own hubris? Every story has two sides, and the truth usually lies somewhere in the shadows. We want to hear your perspective. Join the discussion in the comments below. If this profile gave you a new perspective, support our mission with a like and share. Thank you for being part of the Profile community. Until next time, stay curious.